All right, so October 14th, policy and personnel. Pretty thick agenda. We haven't met in a fortnight.
Yeah, it's been a while. So there's a lot of policies on the recommended for review and possible approval here tonight. You want me to just start working through them?
Yep, I think that's the best way.
Okay, policy 909 is, as many of these are, simple changes. You'll see that there's only changes to a few words. They took out the word satisfactory and changed it to efficient, and they took out police and put it into law enforcement agencies. So that one is just to be in compliance with the law and as it's written now. So it's recommended that we change it just to be consistent with the new verbiage being used. So that one's an easy one. Any questions on any of that? Okay, the school calendar, policy number 2 is policy 803, school calendar. As you know, that the Pennsylvania changed the law last year to say that we could either go, it used to say you have to do 180 and this many hours. Now it says you can do 180 or 990 hours or 1020 hours at the elementary school. We are well within the hours. We use the hours. We also, if you counted the Act 80 days for teachers, we would also be at the days. We're not, after seeking clarification, they do not count those days anymore, but their definition of a school day is anytime the kids come to school. So we believe that the hours is a better way to track this, because technically I send the kids to school, they're there for an hour, I send them home, that counts as a day of school. We don't believe that. We don't share that interpretation, but we are well over the 990 and the 1020 hours. So that's how we'll make sure every time we have a meeting that we are in compliance with either or both of those two rules. But any questions about any of that? This policy basically charges us with making provisions for emergencies that may come up that would require us that would threaten those. So if there's an emergency, like we have snow days built into our schedule, so we can have 5 snow days and we'll still be okay. If we go past that, we have to determine, do we want to bring the kids in for 1 extra day? Do we want to add hours to the end of the day? It does give us a lot more flexibility. Some school districts schedule more days, and then if there's a snow day, they just don't have school. We chose not to do that because we liked the better planning. It allows the teachers to plan a little bit more consistently when they know they're going to have those days in no matter what. So that's why good short story is we haven't really recommended a whole lot of changes under this new law, but we were able to tweak it a little bit with the hours and give those teachers more time for the plan to do those day-to-days that we had the presentation at the academic committee. Those days came out of this change in the law, which is a win for us. So anything on policy 803? Okay. I will move that one to the board. Number 3, policies 103 and 104 are both related to Title IX. Policy 103 related to discrimination and harassment affecting students. So this is, as you know, a pretty big deal in the news. In April this past year, the Department of Education basically released a final determination that they were changing the definitions and the scope of this law and how it should be applied at school. It's important to note that none of this change has anything to do with athletics. And the Department of Education at the federal level has said they're still working on something related to athletics. The recommendation for us is to continue to follow our current policies and procedures on athletics. The reason that's a big deal, is because the definition that they changed, mainly the one that affects us most, is they changed the definition of sex to include gender and all genders that people identify with, which really broadens the scope. It's gotten so contentious that several states have actually filed injunctions. Alaska, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Montana, Ohio, Tennessee, Utah, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming have all filed for injunctions against making this change. Pennsylvania has not, okay? And Pennsylvania intends to enforce this. Several school districts across the state have sued the state government to try to stop this too. And basically, their suit isn't necessarily about not agreeing with transgender. It's agreeing or not agreeing with transgender students or agreeing with transgender students. It's really on the principle of, does the State Department of Education have the ability to change policy and interpret the law beyond the way it's written? So it's a legal argument, right? But it has effects to kids. This is mandated to us. We cannot choose to not follow. Like, my administrators have to follow this. And the good news is we already are following, right? We already treat all students with dignity and respect, and we treat them on a case-by-case basis. We already make special accommodations for transgender students or cisgender students who want to, use restrooms or something if they feel affected. So we do a lot of the things that they're trying to mandate now. The policy or the procedure for complaints, we've had a procedure in place. The expanded definition of this just means more people will go through that process. It's relatively the same process. I mean, we're pretty practiced and we've all been trained. So we're going to follow this procedure. And like I said, it is a mandated policy according to the state of Pennsylvania, but there are all these lawsuits out there right now. And PDE has basically put out word that they're going to continue to change this policy. So my recommendation would be that we have this first reading and then we see what happens with these the lawsuits, and I bring back information to you all when we're ready to move forward. But in the meantime, we're going to follow it anyway.
Yeah, if we're already doing it, we're following the law, then
Correct.
I don't think it makes sense to codify something that ends up making the students the pawn of this game back and forth, and then we have to change it a year and a half later or something when it runs through the courts. If we're already following the law, I think getting it sent back for more information, see what, like, our other local districts doing this.
I can
What are they
find out.
doing with it? That's,
Yeah, let me find out and I'll get back to you and we'll move forward at that time.
I mean, we're here to educate students, not, play the politic game. If our kids are getting the instruction they need and all the resources they need in a non-discriminatory way, that's what we want. And it doesn't really matter what the paper says. Adopting somebody's language or somebody else's language, I think that's
Right. We're gonna follow it and until they tell us different.
I'd be interested in seeing some of those lawsuits, or at least having them summarized, a few of them.
Yeah, we can work on that for you. We can bring it back. So we'll have the first reading tonight. I'll bring back more information before the second reading. Is that fair?
Thank you.
Sally, maybe you'd want Ray-Pac to provide some information on that.
Well, Rob can,
Absolutely. I'll coordinate
Okay,
with
yeah.
Ray-Pac for sure.
And I'm not sure that there was that Supreme Court ruling here in the spring that overturned that Chevron case.
That's exactly the case that they're
I think that's the legal, where the legal contention is that the Department of Ed, either at the federal or the state level, doesn't have the authority if that language wasn't already included in the original or amended legislation. And so I think that's where they're headed with this. Okay, it was because of that Supreme Court ruling.
Okay. All right, so I'll bring back more information before the second reading. If that's okay. All right, anything else? Moving on to policy 103.1. This again is just updates in language. This has to do with students with disabilities and making accommodations for students with disabilities. It takes out a couple of little words, changes some of the phrasing of things. It says the district shall not intimidate, threaten, coerce, discriminate, or retaliate. That's all been removed. And it just says that the district and its employees are prohibited from doing all those things to any student with a qualified disability. It defines qualified disability. It talks about Section 504. It warns against disability harassment, but pretty much other than the definitions and some of the verbiage, it's pretty much the same policy through and through. And again, we follow it. So, we follow the law. So any questions about 103.1? Okay. Policy 234, pregnant parenting married students. There's some pretty significant changes to this. And again, this is somewhat related to Title IX. One of the other things that they changed was the definition of what pregnancy encompasses. And basically what this law says is that the board and the district must recognize students who are pregnant and make accommodations for them. Or students who just have recently delivered children have to have certain privileges if they, and this it's reference to what they call the Pump Act. So if a woman who is just recently had a child wants to pump to naturally feed her child, that she be given that opportunity. Same thing for students is applicable to what we do for our employees now, are the big changes here. So it just talks about when a student is, or parent or guardian identify the student as pregnant, that we have to believe them and in accordance with the law, make these accommodations for them until such time as they are no longer pregnant. So there was a lot to that, but it included breaks for class, intermittent absences to attend medical appointments will be excused, access to online or homebound instruction if necessary, things we would do already, as long as the child was meeting the laws. If there was no truancy, we would absolutely excuse those absences. This gives a pregnant child a little bit more flexibility there, which they should have. I mean, that's a definite life-changing situation. So any questions about any of that? There's also a complaint procedure that would go through, and that's also related to Title IX. Mr. Cronauer is our Title IX coordinator, for those of you, and he's the decision maker and I'm the appeals person. So anytime there's a Title IX complaint, it goes through the principals. The principals work, they take the case to Jared. Jared makes the final decision based on the complaint. And if the parent or person involved wants to appeal that, they appeal it to me. And then if they want to appeal beyond that, we have to hire a hearing officer to go from there. We've never gotten that far, thank goodness, but that's the process just in case. Any questions on 234? Okay, moving right along, hazing. The PSBA has recommended that we change again some of the language here in hazing. They've talked about the definitions of hazing. They talked about aggravated hazing, which is hazing that results in serious bodily injury or death. Organizational hazing, which would be done by a group of students as initiation, I guess. Student activities organizations is defined so that there's a little bit more clear definition of what hazing entails. And again, this one had Title IX implications. It would, if there is a report of hazing, it does go through the Title IX process, especially if it has any sexual connection or nexus. It would go through the person that was bringing the charges of hazing forward would be offered the Title IX process, the complaint process that would go through that I just described, that would go to Jared's. Other than that, it's pretty much the same definition. They change Office of Safe Schools to local law enforcement with jurisdiction, or the school safety and security incident reporting. They just changed some of the verbiage there.
Now, are you allowed to include a policy in our athletic policy or any extracurricular clubs or whatever that before a sports season, that there's a video out there that every participant, or if you're trying out for a team, must watch and has to be verified, like checked off by a parent, just so, because I think the kids don't realize what little things can be considered hazing.
Absolutely.
So, and I think if as part of, before that sports season starts, there's a video, and not only, the prospective athlete has to watch, but also one parent or guardian has to watch it to verify that they've seen it too.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this to Dan Roan, I think it should come through the board that, hey, this is something we need to look into.
Yeah.
Because I've heard of other schools doing this across the United States.
Mr. Rowan and I have already talked about that, and we're going to be implementing that for sure. So we may as well make it a policy. We're going to be implementing it anyway. So if you want us to add a line to this that says it's all student athletes organizations, clubs need to, attend a.
Or is it something even every student should, I mean, because there's
can't
probably
have-
hazing
I
going
think it
on
should
in the
be part of the
classroom.
student
I mean,
handbook
there's
somehow,
classroom in the
so.
hallways, and so it may be something that maybe at the beginning of the year, I mean,
We could add it to our safe to say training. We
Or-
do a mandated
Yeah.
safe to say training that's about 40 minutes. We could do the hazing on
even,
top.
it could- yeah.
I
It's a
think,
good
I
idea.
think, I think Doug, if we do it for all of them, I still would recommend that we do it a second time for those athletes, because there's been that long, deep history of hazing as
Yeah.
part of the ritual
Ritual for, yeah.
of being a football player, wrestler, basketball, whatever. And so maybe having it repeated to the athletes, kind of, bring them back to the reality of, okay, you saw this in September, now you're getting ready to start basketball or wrestling or whatever, now you need to,
And maybe that's the one that the parents have to, the ones that are going
Yeah.
on to extracurricular athletics or whatever, the parent also has
Has to
to
sign off.
sign off on it, that one of the two parents or guardians have seen it as well, has watched it. Whereas if the whole school has the general one, but then
Yeah.
before the sports season. So, I mean, I don't even care if it's done in an LGI room, like, and there's a coach or someone and they can put it right there and then
Yeah. That's a great idea.
I'm just something where at least they know even some little things that would be considered hazing and they're made aware of it.
As far as like social media education and that kind of stuff, we have like some kind of guidance talk on that kind of stuff, like it could be sprinkled in that too.
Well, that's
I know
what,
we-
I think that should be
yeah.
included in that.
Right.
I mean, just,
Yeah, we can absolutely.
There's
social
several
media.
different angles, so they hear it multiple times, because I think it is something that people view as very innocuous, and they don't, to your point, think it's that serious until something bad happens.
Oh,
or
yeah.
you get a video on the internet you can't ever take down for the rest of your life, something,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea. So, and it's easy. We're already kind of talking about how we would do that. We have that parent handbook that the parents, all athletes and parents sign off on. We can make that part of that. Just add the training as mandated.
I like the idea of the video,
Yeah.
so make them click on something, because
Yep.
people gloss over words. There's so many words in the
Oh, yeah.
handbooks.
That's right.
For sure.
People
Yeah.
just flip to the back and sign what they need to sign and turn it in and be done. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just in my job, I have to go through firm element, they call it every year. And it's, I mean, you have to at least answer some questions at the end of it, even though they're basic. So you just can't not watch it.
Right.
It's good.
Yeah,
I mean,
we can
yeah.
see about developing that. That
Or
might take
even
a little
just-
bit
I mean,
longer, but yeah.
Or there are times where to make sure they're watching it, something pops up and you have to type in what it is, like a color
Right.
or a shape. And they know that you're paying attention.
Yeah.
I
I
just
mean-
had to renew my license, and they make you watch all the
Yeah.
videos for child abuse and all that stuff, and you go through it, and they're easy questions, but every 5 minutes there's a question or two, and you answer them,
Yeah,
and you get to move on.
Yeah.
You can't just click through the videos.
For sure. Yeah, but let me look at how we can make the video more engaging and
I'm sure there's other industry-wide videos on,
there's got to be something.
yeah. Because I even think safe sport, I know when my son was involved with hockey and any volunteer, you have to do a safe sport, and that was part of the video. So maybe the safe sport has something out there that would suffice.
Sick, yeah. You use it for gymnastics as well.
Yeah, a lot of organizations use it, I guess.
All right. Thank you very much. Anything else about hazing before we move on? Okay. Policy 249, which is bullying and cyberbullying. I'm not sure if you saw, but cyberbullying was actually added as a new law, you can be charged with cyberbullying now in today's day and age, which is relatively new to the world. But this bullying policy has included it. Here again, they're just cleaning up the language, and they're taking out the Title IX sexual harassment and making it broader discrimination, harassment. Again, if it regards to sex, race, religion, it will go through Title IX process anyway. They'll be offered that. Ron's training for us is basically anytime there's harassment, offer them the Title IX process. It's a little bit more transparent. It holds us to a different timeline. It makes good and bad of that is that sometimes if both parties get to see the report of both sides, so the alleged victim and the alleged perpetrator both get to see what the other people are saying about them or, in the process. So some people don't like that. So people will opt out of that option, but we by offering it, it's good for us as a district because it's more thorough that way. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of big changes to this one. It just basically takes out the Title IX process. And
Sure.
you know. So any questions about cyberbullying? Just a language change? Okay, moving on to 252, dating violence. Here again, this is just another one that we're gonna, change Title IX sexual harassment and other to just discrimination/harassment. They're just basically breaking down that barrier between harassment and Title IX sexual harassment. They also changed the word back to law enforcement agency again here. But that's really the only changes. It's just the semantics involved there.
So, Rob, I have a technical question on this dating violence. How much in the health class is some of this discussed? In other words, kind of the same thing we were talking about before. Do the young ladies, number one, understand that if something happens like this, that they're uncomfortable, what they should do? That, who they should go to, that sort of thing?
I don't know about dating violence, but I can look into it.
And then whether or not, maybe from the guy's perspective, that, there are certain behaviors that are not
For sure.
necessarily, and I understand it's a very touchy subject, and I'm certainly not qualified to
No.
teach it, but I'm sure you would have healthcare or health
HPE teacher. Yeah.
PT teachers that could do this. But it would seem to me that if we're gonna have a policy on this, that there should be an educational component to explain to the students.
You would think that.
It's been a while since I can't quote
We
it
could
to
check
you.
though, yeah.
Oh, I can have to check and get back to
They only
that.
get health in a couple grades. They don't
Well-
get every single year,
They get it 9th, 10th, and 11th. They get health and phys ed.
not as a senior.
Not as a senior. Senior's optional. So, and it's basically phys ed at that time. You get specialized at that point.
Yeah.
But in that health, and I know there is some sex education in the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. I don't remember off the top of my head if they talk about
I
that
mean-
ones, but I'll find out.
I mean, the sex education in my era 60 years ago
It's changed quite a bit.
was, the birds and the bees kind of thing,
Yeah.
and not,
Yeah, I agree.
Consent.
It's
not,
not good.
it's
not
important.
about making a pass when the girl's saying no.
I know. I told my son, don't touch anybody unless you have express written consent. But no, it's a big deal. It's an important topic, and it's not something, yeah. So let me find out for you and get back to you. I don't have an
I
answer.
just think there should be, if we're gonna hold them to this policy,
Yeah.
there ought to be some educational component that goes with it
I agree with that.
to hopefully prevent problems.
Mhm. Okay. Any other questions about dating violence? Again, that's an optional policy, but it makes sense to me. There's some times where, I don't bring the optional policies, but that one makes sense.
The pizza kid's calling me, sorry.
So, moving on to 317.1, this is educator misconduct. I'm trying to
We're in a
remember what
meeting,
this is.
honey. Aw.
Again, this is to change the educator misconduct policy to be more in line with the harassment versus Title IX sexual harassment laws. It's basically changes it from Title IX sexual harassment to sex-based discrimination or sex-based harassment. So again, it's just semantics, just to fall in line with the new policies, but nothing's changed here as far as enforcement. We'd follow the same procedure. Any other questions or concerns there? Okay, policy 824, maintaining the professional student boundaries. Again, this is just, they redefine the word adult. They talk about the definition, they added, for purpose of this policy, legitimate educational reasons will include matters of communication related to teaching, counseling, athletics, extracurricular activities. This is, again, in today's day and age with cell phones being the number one way to communicate. There's Remind apps, there's I'm trying to think of the other ones, the team,
GroupMe.
GroupMe is a big one, yeah. So educators who sometimes are acting as coaches or other adults that are acting as coaches will have contact digitally with players, with student athletes. And this is where that change comes from, is just to understand that there could be legitimate reasons for an adult to contact a student for this, but they still need to do it in a proper way and not cross that line. They need to maintain that appropriate teacher boundary, coach boundary with the kid. So that's really just it, is they put in there the legitimacy there. And then 15, if you look at there, telling a student personal secrets or sharing personal secrets with a student or asking students to keep any conversation, gift, or activity a secret is deemed inappropriate. It makes sense. That's really they change, again, sexual harassment. They got rid of that just to include harassment. They changed verbally to orally. Just some, bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just cleaning up some of the language there, but it's basically the same policy in essence, just to expanded it to include those electronic communications. Any questions about maintaining professional adult student boundaries? And again, that does apply to our coaches as well. I mean, that's something the thing going on in Cambria Heights, that there was a teacher and a coach. Clearly they did not maintain professional boundaries, but if it was just a coach, this policy applies to them as well. Just because if you're an adult working for the district, you are expected to maintain those professional boundaries. Okay, 807 is opening exercises, a moment of silence. This is an easy one. They passed a law in the last Congress that, the last assembly, that we are going to have a moment of silence in recognition of 9/11 every year. And so we're changing our policy to reflect that. We did it this past year. We fly flags at half mast and we have a moment of silence in remembrance of people who lost their lives that day. So any questions on that one? Okay. Now 13.1, this is the discipline of students with disabilities. And this is, again, they're recommending this policy. Actually, I think this is a mandated one, to remind districts or make sure that districts are following the law when it comes to discipline for students with disabilities. So they changed things. They added the word weapon, or the definition of weapon is defined as a weapon, device, instrument, material, substance, or animate or inanimate that is used for or is readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. So you can no longer expel a student with special needs for bringing a toy gun, right? Because the toy gun is not going to cause serious injury. Could you discipline them for it? Sure, you could. Can you expel them for bringing a weapon to school? No. The weapon has been redefined to make sure that school districts are not overstepping there. They redefined serious bodily injury, which is serious bodily injury which involves substantial risk of death, extreme physical pain, protracted and obvious disfigurement, or protracted loss or impairment of the function of the body member, organ, or mental faculty. So they expanded that definition a little bit. It used to be basically just disfigurement. So they've expanded that a little bit more, which is good. They,
And this is strictly for
students with special needs.
students with special needs.
Correct. If you are diagnosed to have a disability that impairs your reason or decision-making, when you are disciplined, there are different rules basically, because
Okay.
you may not have the same capacity to make decisions as another student.
So one of the things that I remember from early on my time on the board was that a pocket knife for a regular student of any size was considered a weapon and could be used for expulsion or whatever. But there was a blade length on the knife for special needs students that if it was below that level, it was not considered a weapon. And if a student brought one of those into the school, they couldn't be disciplined for bringing a weapon. How does this impact?
Says the definition, I stopped reading, it says, weapon is defined as a weapon, device, instrument, material, or substance, animate or inanimate, that is used for readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury, except that such terms do not include a pocket knife with a blade of less than 2 1/2 inches in length.
So that's still in the policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And we try to do that with, I mean, if a Boy Scout leaves a pocket knife in his pocket, or his bag or something like that, we try to take that into consideration. We don't throw every kid out.
I know, but there were times when
Sure.
in other districts where
Absolutely.
that may have happened. And,
Mhm.
I seem to recall one situation where there was a knife found in a student's car that happened to be parked on school property. And it caused quite the kerfuffle.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't brought into the,
Yeah, it can. I mean, it's technically up on school grounds as parking lot as well. So
Yeah.
we could extend it to that if we felt there was a need. For sure.
Now, Rob, the serious bodily injury, you said that's new.
Well, it's not new. They've expanded it a little bit to include I think they changed.
Extreme physical pain.
That's what I thought. The pain was probably the
Yes.
thoughts. Okay,
So
Okay.
a quick example of this, when I was a principal at Greater Johnstown, a student smashed another kid's hand with his fist and broke the child's hand, broke 2 of the bones in the hand. And we tried to expel the student, but this was like the 17th time that the child had been in trouble for something like that. But they had several disabilities, and the court basically found that that did not meet
the other thing,
definition of
Like
serious bodily
disfigurement.
injury.
it's not disfigurement.
Correct. Now, it might,
It's not a risk of death. Okay,
correct.
but now that would be extreme physical pain.
Maybe
But I
we
just-
can make that argument. That still would be up to the courts, I think, at that point.
That's what I think too.
Yeah. So it's,
So they added extreme physical pain. You can't just put physical pain.
it's all subjective.
Yeah, and how do you define extreme physical pain?
I think it's subjective.
Every time you use the word prolonged, what does that mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
How long is
okay.
it prolonged?
yeah.
Because the only thing bolded would be that, so that's the only change
Yes,
in that
ma'am.
area. Okay.
Yeah, if we did a good job, that's the only thing that's changed.
And this is really about that unilateral school placement in an outside setting or an alternative setting.
Correct.
So if a
Oh.
parent is in agreement, so let's say, for example, it's not one of those 3 things.
Right.
Student does something like that with
Uh-huh.
pounds the student's hand and breaks their hand. As
Right.
long as the parent agrees, it's no issue with an alternative setting. If it's one of those 3 things, it doesn't matter if the parent agrees or not, you can unilaterally place a student in an alternative setting.
Great, got it. Yes, okay, thank you.
Any other questions about discipline of students with disabilities? 113.1. Okay. 113.2, behavior support. This policy also is along those same lines. It talks about positive behavior support plans and behavior interventions. Basically, the point is here that school districts are now coming around to the understanding that behavior must be taught and reinforced as well as math, English, science, social studies. For a long time, we just used to teach them how to read, we teach them how to do math, and we just expect them to behave, without ever reinforcing those things. We've done a pretty good job being proactive here. We've had positive behavior support plans that Mr. Sportcheck brought in, and positive behavior support across the school wide. every one of our schools except one has been recognized by the state as model schools for this. So, we have these things in place. Our school psychologists do a great job of doing functional behavior assessments and putting in positive behavior support plans with the team. We have, with our MTSS program, if you guys remember the triangle, we always show you, but there's two halves of the triangle. One half is academic, the other half is behavioral. And, just like the academic triangle, 80% of the kids are going to be okay just the way they are, right? And then the other 20% are going to require a little bit more intervention. That's where these positive behavior support plans come into place. So again, here they just had a couple of definitions and words updated. Nothing that is too, earth-shattering or changing the policy.
Everything is
fundamentally.
already in place.
Yeah, everything's already in place. So again, they changed the police department to local law enforcement agency that has jurisdiction a couple of times, but that's really it. Any questions about that one? That's another easy one. Threat assessment, again, this is one of those that's just going to update the language here. Again, just to make sure that we're in line with the law and the verbiage. Threat assessment team shall establish and implement procedures in accordance with the district's memorandum of understanding with each law enforcement agency having district jurisdiction over the school, which we do that already. School safety incident reporting, we have to have reports on all of this stuff with every law enforcement agency that has jurisdiction. We do that already. Every time we do the Safe Schools report, we send it to both state police and the Indiana Borough Police for both of those agencies to sign off on it before we submit it to PDE. Any questions there? Okay. Educational opportunity for military children. We just updated this policy the last time, and apparently they made a small change here again
Jeez.
to add, or in accordance with applicable law. When it talks about children of military family, they added or in accordance with applicable law as part of the definition, and then they added National Guardsmen and reservists who are required to perform responsibilities in their service, which results in the child having to transfer from a public school in another state to a public school in this state. So really, it's just to make sure that all servicemen and women are represented. Which again, we probably would have done anyway without the policy, but it's good to have it in writing. Any other questions about that one? That one's mandated, so we don't have a choice on that. 202 is non-resident students. They took out the board shall require that student appropriate legal documentation. This is more for students that are coming to us that are homeless, immigrants, refugees, etc. So who may not have all of the required information. There's some pretty significant changes to the language on this one. It says the district may disenroll a student for following a determination that the student does not reside in the district and is not otherwise entitled to free school privilege in the district. The district shall provide notice of the parents and guardians and other persons having charge or care of the student and reasons for the district's determination to disenroll the student. This one actually is about students who are coming to the school district who live on the wrong side of the line, basically. So,
Which we know something about.
we know a little bit about it. Yes, sir. And yeah, this could be relevant moving forward. So, again, it's basically, we have to notify the parents and of our intentions. We have to allow them the opportunity to appeal. But then we do have the power and responsibility actually to follow the law and disenroll students who do not live in our district.
So Rob, if there were children of immigrants here and they lived in the district then we would still be required to provide them the education. Is that
100%.
correct?
We,
Okay.
we do currently. Yeah, it happens over, yeah.
Okay.
So,
So how did, you mentioned that this change was in part about homeless and immigrant children, and what I'm trying to get at is, how does this change, if we're gonna, if they're living in the district,
if they're living in the district, you're okay. But if you make the argument that they're not living in the district, and even if they're not living in the district, but they're attending our school, you have to verify that they're not immigrants, refugees, or homeless. If they are that, then there's another step to it. The law about homeless says.
what is that step?
Homeless law says that we have to maintain normalcy for that child the best we can. So we're not allowed legally to just pull the kid out and say, I'm sorry, you got to go to Blairsville now because you live on the other side of the line. We would have to work with Blairsville and make a transition, and the student has the right to choose which school they go to if they are homeless, refugee, or immigrant at that moment, at least for that year. And then we have
For homeless, though, it says that you would work with children and youth.
correct, yes,
So,
ma'am.
yeah.
And we make the best determination for those kids. We have, Tara's our homeless liaison right now. I used to be that. There's a lot of work that goes into that. There's
It is.
more and more students that qualify as homeless because the
Right.
definition is so wide now. So she frequently makes arrangements for students that live outside our district to attend our school because they were in our school at one point.
Right.
Some life event happened. They're no longer in our school.
You know, in
So-
transitional housing, it happens frequently.
Absolutely. So in the law, just basically, this policy change is making sure that we don't just say, well, you don't live in our district anymore as a reason to disenroll the student without going through that process.
Right. And I think people would be so surprised that we have so many homeless that they don't know. We had homeless IUP students.
It happens more and more. It happens more and more, for sure. So I think we went up, I think the last year I was the homeless liaison, I think we had 16 homeless. I think last year we had 48,
Yeah.
Right.
something like that. It was significant.
Probably gonna be the same this year as
It's
well.
just a sad circumstance for the kids.
It really is. And we should make accommodations for those kids, because they have enough going on in their lives, so. But this one's more aimed at students that are not living in our district
Right.
legally, how the process we have to follow to
Right.
disenroll those students. Okay,
Although it's all vulnerable, and it does take in all the homeless and other stuff too.
sure. Any other questions about policy 202? Okay, policy 913, this is non-school organizations. This is, at the last meeting, we talked about the need for some sort of policy governing over political demonstrations on our grounds. So when we scoured our current active policies to try to find, where this would fit in, this is what we came up with. And if you are looking at the policy, if you go to prohibited activities and materials, my recommendation is that we add one line, rather than go write a whole nother policy or change anything significantly. We added one line to prohibited activities and materials, which is number 8, and it says, prohibited activities and materials shall mean activities and materials that, number 8, involve political campaigning or demonstration on behalf of any candidate or cause without prior written approval from the superintendent of schools. And basically that means this: I want to pass out flyers to encourage people to vote. You write me a letter, approved, right? You're just going to sit there and hand out flyers about why it's important to vote, approved. You want to hand out flyers for Donald Trump, Kamala Harris. If you're just going to hand out flyers and that's going to be it, approved. If you're going to bring a large barn animal on our property and near our kids, not approved, right? So that's kind of the approach we're taking there. If
We
you're going to
hear you.
chain yourself to a tree and starve yourself for 6 days, not approved, right? So it just gives us the ability to approve or not approve any requests at that time.
Would you consider taking political off of that and make it any demonstration or campaign?
Yeah.
That, it could be a non-political
That's
thing that
true.
they should come to you
Fair
also.
point. Yeah, I can definitely make that
I mean, it
change.
could be pro-life, any,
Right,
name the topic du jour,
right. That would be an example that's not really political, but it is political.
No, but, or just,
Yeah.
random demonstration.
Any,
Yeah,
any
I
social,
understand.
it could be Super Bowl winning team,
Yeah, for sure.
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
And we already have a policy like that for students. Students can demonstrate about just about anything they want, but they do have to go through an application
Yeah.
process to us, and it has a time limit, it has limits on what they can and can't do. And if they agree to that, we let them demonstrate. We encourage them to demonstrate. We want them to
Right.
become active, citizens. So we will do that. It's kind of the same approach here. If you're gonna do it responsibly, you're gonna do it outside school hours, it's not gonna disrupt education, it's not gonna put anybody at risk, sure you can. If it does any of those other things, no, I'm sorry, can't do it.
Can you make sure, because I think at the high school, aren't there clubs? I think they have a young Democrats and young Republicans. It's a club. So, I mean, just,
If they wanted to demonstrate or. do
no, just
anything-
make sure what things are, I mean, within their bylaws, it's correct and they're doing things.
Sure. Yeah, this is for non-school agencies, this,
Oh, okay,
this one,
non-school.
but yeah, we have the policy for students, but yeah, absolutely, they do that. At the student policy covers that, and Wade and Doug do a pretty good job at making sure that they meet with them ahead of time and follow the rules, so we should be okay there. Okay, any questions about that one? Okay, and then finally, number 18 on your agenda is the addition of a volleyball assistant coach. This came to us by our new volleyball coach who is just taking over the program. She's a teacher at our high school. This program is growing, and it's growing quickly. She's up over 60 kids now in the volleyball. It's a very successful program. It's something we want to encourage, but managing two junior high teams because they've had to split the teams and those numbers are getting bigger and bigger is becoming a little bit much. So she's asking for an additional assistant to help manage the numbers. I talked to Dan Roan, I talked to Wade and Doug. Everybody agrees that this position, Mr. Cronauer agrees as well for, $3,322. It seems like a logical step to manage this and support this growing program for women to participate in sports. So we're just asking to add that so she can post and advertise and hire somebody on her behalf. Again, in these situations, we trust the head coach to hire the assistant, so that they, philosophies align.
So this is basically a junior high assistant.
Junior high assistant, yeah, but now she would have the right to,
No,
Wait,
but
yeah.
yeah.
but yes,
Right now, what do we have? Just two, assistant and head?
there's an assistant head in the junior high.
Are there? Okay.
I think
Junior
all
high is only one.
right,
Yeah,
got
this
it.
is- this would add-
2,000 or 3,000? You said 2,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, is it 2,322?
23, 22. You said 32.
Yeah.
Let me
something.
verify that, because I want to make sure I didn't make a mistake on this end. But it's not, it's no more than 3,000, how about that?
Okay.
But I'll verify that for you right now. But that's all I have, so I mean, if you want to have a discussion about that, any.
No, I think that's perfect. I mean, just see for supervision on buses or locker rooms and.
Yeah, if this is a junior high by herself, you have one coach down there, somebody's injured, we got some troubles.
Agreed, and our junior high volleyball coach is a teacher, so we release her early for games and stuff, but we won't release her early for practices, and she teaches at an elementary school, which means our junior high kids are gathering for practice, and she's still at work, so it would help, if we can find someone to help them manage those.
Aren't two of them teachers, the head coach and one of the other coaches?
This is the junior high.
I think the head coach is definitely a teacher, the junior high coach is definitely a teacher.
That's right, okay.
One of the volunteer coaches is a teacher.
Oh, she's volunteer,
I
okay.
think so. I'd have to verify if she's paid. Mrs. Evans,
Jamie?
Yeah.
She's a
science teacher.
Yeah, she's a teacher.
I know she a paid assistant coach or volunteer assistant.
Okay,
I don't remember. I have to look for you. But that is all I have. So 18
That's
agenda
enough.
items in 1 hour or less.
And I was
Wow.
late, so.
About 50 minutes, actually.
We got
And Walter told two long stories.
And I did. I was doing my best to slow it down, but I just couldn't get it done.
All right, thanks.